Get 5 coffins ready.
Hey everyone, welcome to my guide for Khepri. Remember when I said Geb was the most supportive support? I was lying, it's Khepri. Khepri is not self-sufficient in the least, and focuses on supporting his teammates through and through, setting up for the team and protecting them like no other. So if you're looking to truly support your teammates, look no further than Khepri. Before we go further, this guide is it, number 128. I double checked, and with this guide, I am officially caught up with the most recent god. More updates at the end of the video if you're interested. Build-wise, as you'd expect, Khepri goes all out with the defense. There's really no reason to buy damage on Khepri, however, he does require a lot of cooldown reduction to properly function. Relics-wise, the world really is your oyster here. I mean, you could start off with something like Shell and then go into Frenzy, or do a Shell meditation if you want to be more defensive. Bracer right now is probably my favorite supportive relic, but also Sunder is good too if you gotta kill tanks. Just start with something defensive, and then second relic can be whatever you like. Shard-wise, with an aggressive dueling partner, Carapace Shard all the way. Khepri can easily get in range to deal the basic attack needed for Carapace, and for a more all-rounded one, you want to go Horn Shard. Recipe-wise, this is much more simple, just Sturdy Stew. Khepri's passive is a lot like Sturdy Stew actually, hands off but still effective. Every 5 seconds, Khepri pulses out a shield which will apply to himself and nearby allies. However, this pulse is increased to a 10-second timer if Khepri has been in combat recently. So if you can, you want to stack the shield up all the way before taking fights as Khepri. This stacks up to 5 times on any target, although this of course takes a very long time to fully stack. It's crazy long. It's almost like there's a time at the start of the match where you could just stand by your teammate. Yeah, that's the most important part of this passive really. Just make sure to stand nearby your dual lane partner at the start of the match, and that's all. You have mastered Khepri's passive. Although it still comes up in the laning phase and during teamfights sometimes too, but the same idea applies. Just stay near your allies, applying the shield, and yeah, that's it. Just be aware of it and try to communicate with your team about when the next shield is coming. It can very easily be the difference maker in early game skirmishes, because obviously if your teammates miss the shield, it's not coming back for a little while. So unfortunately, this starts the trend on Khepri where you're not really the one playing Khepri. Your teammates are the ones playing Khepri since everything you do is largely based around assisting them in their actions. One ability that lets you go a bit more rogue is Khepri's first ability. Khepri dashes forward a short distance, and will damage and pass through all enemy minions. Upon hitting an enemy god, Khepri will damage, grab, pull, and silence the enemy god, and will gain protection for the full duration of the pull. This is Khepri's main form of engage and peel, and yeah, I'm sure you already gathered that it has its fair share of downsides. First and foremost, gods with cripples. Artio, Maui, Nox, Ares, Cupid. I mean, cripples aren't too common, but if you pick Khepri too early on in a draft, expect to get against a cripple or two to help weaken Khepri's already weak engage. Because if you can't tell, one big reason this is a weak engage is because you're limited to hitting only one enemy. Now in the laning phase, not that big a deal. Just go for a grab on the enemy ADC, and once you start rotating, the enemy mid laner. And it's one of the best abilities in the game in early and mid game for a pure, I'm gonna pluck this guy, murder his face off type of ability. But that opens up another issue. Any hard CC from an outside source will also stop the pull. Khepri isn't knockup immune in this pull either, so it can make it extremely difficult to, and no pun intended, pull this ability off every time. So this ability is clearly good when it hits an important target, but you're going to need to be decisive about when you use it to ensure it goes off in its entirety. In that sense as well though, you can kind of just save it for peel, because it is a really good peel ability too. Like with Maui pull a few guides ago though, don't forget about the enemy basic attacks. Luckily this time, you can't be CC'd out of this ability by whoever you're pulling, but they can and most certainly will basic attack you. Like with Maui though, there's only so much you can do about this, so a lot of the time, you pull who you gotta pull, and sometimes you die for it. That's all part of the game. Generally though, this ability isn't what Khepri's all about. Khepri usually keeps his distance and uses his other abilities, saving this ability for escaping or for when he knows he can really use it to peel or engage. One such ability he uses at range is his second ability. Khepri fires out a slow-moving projectile which will pass through all enemies and walls. It will apply damage over time and affect all enemies it hits, but more importantly, will reduce the physical protections of enemies as well as apply damage mitigation to any allies it hits. And that protection reduction works on everything, objectives, minions, gods, you name it. So that mixed with the respectable damage of the ability means that any hunter who lanes with Khepri will have a very easy time clearing the wave. Note how I said a hunter though, as remember, this only reduces physical protections, so any mage ADCs will not have the bonus damage from this ability. This doesn't mean that mage ADCs are bad with Khepri, absolutely not, but it is something to keep in mind if lane pressure is something you're after when you're picking Khepri. All that said, the damage mitigations portion of course works on any ally god, and is by far the more important way of using the ability. It's very simple too. Get nice and close to your allies since the projectile is a bit slow, then shoot the projectile through them. Boom. Of course, you'll want to get some collateral with it if you can, hitting as many allies and as many enemies as you can with this ability. Although generally speaking, you want to focus on hitting the most important ally, I mean duh, since this ability gives all the way up to a massive 30% damage mitigation. The potential for saving allies here cannot go unnoticed. The duration is a mere 3 seconds though, so be sure to be quick with applying this ability, but don't be so hasty applying it that you end up wasting it. But still, be tactical here. If your team is going to pound town on a singular enemy, just focus on tuning the enemy instead to increase your teammate's damage. Just so long as you don't trap yourself into thinking this ability is only for damage or only for defense, you'll be set. Khepri gets all this started with his third ability. Khepri, after a short delay, roots and damages all enemies in AoE out of range. And that is the ability. It's not super hard to hit, but if there's anything you want to practice on Khepri, it's this ability. Then the follow-ups here are clear as day. At long range, just 2. And if you're a little bit closer, pull with your first ability. And don't forget, displacement abilities such as your pull aren't affected by DR, so going root into your pull gives you the entire duration of the pull. It's great for some poke as well with that 3-2 combo, to really harass lane opponents getting collateral damage on enemy minions as well whenever you can. Additionally though, this ability is Khepri's best self-peel. If you didn't already notice, Khepri is big and therefore easy to body block, so when trying to escape with your first ability, you can easily be blocked and grab someone by accident. So when you're in a bad situation and are getting chased down, using this ability at your feet to root enemies who are chasing you may be your only chance to safely get out with your first ability. But if you want to talk about abilities that can save people, you need to talk about Khepri's ultimate. Khepri requires a valid target to use this ability, and can target any ally god with this ability, including himself. Allies with this ultimate are cleansed of CC, like with the Geb shield, and also have increased movement speed for 5 seconds. More importantly though, if the affected ally dies with this ultimate on them, they'll be revived and brought back to Khepri's current location, and if Khepri dies within that 5-second window, they'll instead be revived in place. And important to note, executes such as Ao Kuang, Achilles, and Thanatos ultimates will still execute allies who have this ultimate on them, and they will not be revived. So again, be cautious about picking Khepri too early, as this leaves you wide open to one of the easiest counters in the entire game. You see Khepri, you pick execute. This ability on paper may seem like it only has one use. When a teammate is about to die, ult them, and then they come back to you and are revived. Happy days. If I had one tip about the more standard usage of this ability, don't wait for your allies to be at 1 HP to use this ability. Yes, obviously, if you get the revive, it's great because they're transported to you, but if you're just sitting there waiting for your teammates to die so that you can get your big moment where you ult someone at the very last moment and everyone spams you rock in chat, there's actually a good chance that you could miss your timing or simply get CC'd and be left unable to use the ultimate in time. Generally speaking, the more aware the enemy team is, the more likely they'll be to try and stop you from ulting someone, so don't rely on the enemy team thinking you're invisible. Generally speaking, what you should actually look out for is using this ability for its cleanse and its movement speed instead, cleansing allies who get jumped on by enemy tanks or enemy junglers. Remember that it's a 5-second duration, so it grants them a whole 5 seconds of that great move speed, so the cleanse, plus the movement speed, plus the fact that nobody wants to kill the target because they'll just be revived, is actually enough to save people a lot of the time. Relying solely on the revive means that you're solely relying on the enemy team being too trigger happy and or relying on the enemy team just ignoring you, which isn't always going to work. That's not to say there aren't clutch moments where this doesn't happen. They happen all the time with Khepri ultimate. Khepri ultimate someone who's about to get cuckoo ulted. Khepri ult someone who's about to get a crack into the face. It's absolutely still a factor. Just don't rely too hard on saving this ultimate for the last second, even if that tends to lead to the best case scenarios. You should get comfortable with both saving your ultimate for when your teammates are about to die, as well as using it more preemptively so your teammates can use the ultimate's other aspects to escape by themselves. And frankly, yeah, those are the two scenarios that cover the ability's uses a lot of the time. But let's talk about the niche applications and when you may want to use them. And keep in mind these little niche uses are usually only an option for when you start getting cooldown reduction online. One mechanic that you may have already thought about is dashing away with your first ability as your teammates are getting revived, in order to make more distance between yourself and the enemy team. Don't forget about that big cleanse for one. It really is just like a Geb shield that grants your teammates movement speed on top. So even though a revive might not be on the table, don't forget about just using this ability to cleanse, ensuring that unpredictable revive portion won't even need to be a factor. This is great against hard lockdown gods like Athena, Ymir, Thor, and more, who heavily lock down enemies for themselves and for their team. Let's not forget about what movement speed does for you in SMITE. It's by far and away the best stat in the game, so while this ability is mostly a defensive one, don't forget that in moments when your team is heavily winning a fight, you can just slap this ability on your carries, namely assassins, the classic of course being Mercury, to give them an even better chance of just rolling over their enemies. The movement speed is a factual aspect that allows this, but don't forget about the psychological aspect too. When someone's getting ran at someone with a Khepri ult on them, it can make them apprehensive as to how they want to handle it. You feel like you can't really kill them for diving so deep, nor can you get away from them thanks to the movement speed, so it feels very oppressive. That brings up just using the ultimate for movement speed defensively too. This is great for allies who lack movement abilities like a Poseidon. If the fight went bad for you and you're just being chased down, ult your ally early on to get them out safe and sound with that movement speed. It's a great option. That brings up the bug himself. When should you use the ult on yourself as Khepri? Honestly, almost never. If you lost your chance to ult someone as Khepri, typically ulting yourself isn't going to do much. It can buy you time for your team, absolutely, but especially when it comes to the early game when this ability is still at its maximum cooldown, all you're doing is potentially preventing a teammate from getting revived in the near future. And of course in casual game modes where the respawn timers are a lot quicker, this is even worse. Remember that aspect of your teammates being brought back to you is one of the best factors of the ability. If allies were just revived in place, this ability would be terrible, so vis-a-vis, ulting yourself is almost never a good way to get yourself out of a bad situation. I will say that the best way of ulting yourself, like the usage I mentioned earlier, is ulting yourself purely for movement speed, instead when you're teamed with allies who can easily save themselves. Because again, Khepri, big slow bug, so sometimes it's best just to use the movement speed on yourself to run away. And last little fun factoid, when hit by CC that doesn't prevent this ultimate from being used, such as a root, don't forget that you can cleanse yourself with this ultimate to potentially save yourself. Let's see some more tricks with some combos with Khepri. 3, 2. 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 1, 2, 3 as they run away. Ult yourself. 1, 3 as they run, then 2. For ability leveling, you want your 2 at level 1, your 3 at level 2, and your 1 at level 3, although you may want your 1 at level 2 against more aggressive lane opponents. From there you max your 2, your 3, then your 1, leveling up the ultimate whenever you can. You can skip leveling the ultimate and just level your core abilities after level 5, but I never found that all that helpful. I say just go for your most important tool, your ultimate. And if you didn't already notice, in a lot of matches, Khepri is just his ultimate. His 2's mitigation is cool, but his root and his pull, just awful CC abilities by today's standards. Easy to counter, risky to use, they really aren't very good. But that ultimate, Jesus. There really is nobody who can do what Khepri does, even after 8 years in the game. But all that said, even considering his reign of terror for the first year of his release, Khepri nowadays is actually a pretty honest character. His lane pressure is good, but you can't be too aggressive without putting yourself at risk. That ultimate is absolutely incredible, but picking Khepri too early or getting against disciplined players will quickly see that ultimate hard countered. I won't say that Khepri's hard, because he's not, but he does require a level of patience with your teammates and coordination with them too to succeed. What I'm trying to say is, please don't be one of those Khepris who doesn't revive people just because you don't like them. That's weird. Don't do that. Thanks. Otherwise, by learning Khepri, you gain access to a support who really does do it all, but requires a strong team behind him full of hard carries and other characters who have some hard CC to make up for his shortcomings in those regards. Get it all right though, and you'll be flying nearly every game as Khepri. Just watch out for those executes, huh? That's all for Khepri for now, but like I said at the start of the video, this is it. It took, as I actually correctly anticipated at the time, 2 years to get here, but it's finally over. Ish. I absolutely plan to make guides on every new character in the game, and it'll be a lot easier since I'm not trying to balance doing guides on older gods with learning and writing for new ones. Additionally, I expect updated guides on any majorly reworked gods. Gods who received minor reworks or major changes to individual abilities may receive guides too, but it just depends on how well those guides hold up compared to how the character gets played in the future after those changes. Also, I do think some re-releases are in order. Kleena, Mulan, and Cthulhu really stick out as guides where I should have taken more time with them. It's been a while, so I don't even remember what the process was for those videos, but expect a few re-releases on guides that needed more in-depth information, or just generally lacking in information because they were early guides where I hadn't really gotten into the format yet. Those are all in the future though, and I'll be coasting out the rest of the year with some more casual videos, maybe some montages, funny moments videos, and just general SMITE culture videos to bring some entertainment, but more than anything spark some discussion in the comments. Being able to hear from all sorts of sides of the SMITE community on various subjects has been the best part of becoming bigger on YouTube. Check out my Loki rework 2 years later video and Top Gods to One Trick video series if you want an idea of the types of videos that are coming. Speaking of becoming bigger on YouTube, some shoutouts are in order too. First and foremost are the OGs, of course. My actual friends spring to mind as the people who boosted engagement and are the ones who truly got things rolling. Even talking like 10 years ago when I first started doing these. Then, I still occasionally see people back from my game reviewing days and my SMITE gameplay video days in the comments, which is awesome to see, so thanks for your continued support there. After those types of videos, the guide started, and we gotta give a shout out to Betty. I actually forgot he commented on my original Susano guide, my first guide. Betty's been nothing but supportive, and he's a gem of the SMITE community. We're all better off having him in the fold. Paul as well needs a shout out. Taking time to look at my Merlin guide and giving me some tips on how to improve was a huge morale boost. There were a few pros here and there who also helped me better understand the meta or item choices along the way. It's not a competition, but Paul definitely won. I also had to give a shout out to anyone who told me to include builds in my guides. I don't know why I didn't include them early on. Okay, I know why. It was to not date the video and avoid having people ask me for new builds every patch. Man, that was stupid. I should have just included them. People were going to ask for new builds anyways. Also along the way, shout out to everyone who told me how difficult it was to follow some of the terminology as a new player. Now I'll puff my chest out and tell you that the encyclopedia entries at the bottom of the screen was my idea, but it was inspired by people telling me how hard it was to follow some of the specific terminology and that sometimes they can make the guides not helpful, so thanks for that. As for specific people who comment on every video, well, people come and go, so I'd hate to pick and choose who I shout out here. But if you're supporting me, whether that just be by liking, subscribing, commenting, or just viewing the videos, it's greatly appreciated. It's been an awesome time, and so long as SMITE exists, you can bet I'll be making videos about it in some form or another. So good night, and good luck.